Hi there, it's Sunday the 3rd of May and I'm Nola and I'm coming to you from Australia. This evening I'm going to read a short section out of my memoir, The Peace Angel, and it's regarding senior leadership. Now, senior leadership for me began at age 19. At 16, I was the catering manager for a very large cruising and touring company in Australia's capital. And that role I fulfilled at the same time as when I was working various other jobs, and I was also studying full-time at high school. And as a result of that important and managerial role at the age of 16, by the time I'd finished high school, year 12 as it's called now, it was called sixth form then, I was 17 and a half, and obviously most of my peers were 18 years old. I'd matriculated to Melbourne University, but circumstances were such that I was influenced not to take that particular opportunity to study physiotherapy at Melbourne University, and I didn't move to Melbourne at that time. That was at the end of 1974. So in 75 and 76, I actually undertook hotel management and catering operations training. We did everything from learning how to be French chefs to sommeliers, to we did butchery, we did food science and worked in labs, and every aspect of running an international hotel and silver service, gueridon cookery, every aspect of that we learned back to front, and it was the most fantastic couple of years of my life, which culminated in my being given a position as the Deputy General Manager, or what was called Under Manager, of the Park Royal International in Canberra. The Park Royal was part of the Travelodge Group, a big multinational group of international hotels. And in 1976, as you can imagine, there were no anti-discrimination laws, there were no occupational health and safety laws in Australia, and it was a very sexist world for a 19-year-old who technically wasn't an adult running an international hotel. I had the great pleasure of spending my Friday evenings when I was on shift and managing the hotel, dining with the Minister for Foreign Affairs, who at the time was Andrew Peacock. And there were so many stories that I've put into my memoir about the funny times and the VIPs that I met, Dr. Hook ironing their jeans, those sorts of things. They're memories that stay with you for life. And the interesting point came when I was wanting to see what else I could do, because I needed to be challenged. I was wanting to be given opportunities and more accountability and more responsibility. When I sat with my manager, he said, look, you'll never have my job as general manager because you're a woman. And I was mortified. It was like, wait a minute, that's not fair. Just because I'm female doesn't mean I should be discriminated against. But the more that I worked there, the more I realized the system and society just didn't allow that. So I actually bit the bullet and I decided to start all over again at the bottom. And that was my first experience at the ripe young age of 19. That was my first experience at being a senior leader on the shop floor. In my memoir, I talk about my transition, the various things that I applied for along the way in seeking a new career. And I eventually applied for a position as a public servant, what they called in Australia a base grade clerk, a clerk class 1, and I won a position that was based in Sydney working for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And just prior to that role, I was offered a short couple of months worth of work in another position down at the Domain in Sydney, which is near the harbour, and it was with the Maritime Services Board. And I'll just read to you the couple of paragraphs regarding that role and the transition from being in senior leadership, running an international hotel, working shift work, having lots of staff, functions, restaurant, housekeeping, front office, all of those people to take care of, budgets to manage, schedules and all the logistical aspects, security aspects to manage. And then I became this base grade clerk. But prior to that, I had this other role. Lest I forget, the 2 weeks just before I took up the base grade clerk's job, I had to wait for an opening in the Veterans Department, so the public service offered me a tea lady's job at the Maritime Services Board at Circular Quay in Sydney. It was located down near the Domain, where many of the city's homeless and derelict would sleep at night. It was a very seedy and undesirable location to work. A few short weeks earlier, I had been managing a 5-star hotel with teams of staff all over the hotel, all doing their thing, humming along quite nicely and dining with VIPs and diplomats. A few weeks later, I was wheeling a trolley with hot water urns, cookies, coffee, tea bags, hot chocolate, cakes, and greasy fried food, serving rude and arrogant public servants who had nothing better to do than complain about their day, their pay, or their significant other. That was my first experience as the leader on the shop floor, seeing just how badly people can be treated based on the level of the job they hold or the capability they're presumed to have. No mind was paid to the past life of the person wheeling the trolley. Just a cursory flip of the hand and a snide comment if the trolley didn't serve them what they wanted. My time there was such a learning experience, and it taught me a lot about what not to teach my staff and others during my second climb to the top of my profession. In No Boxing Allowed, there is a whole chapter on the traits of great leadership. And basically what I've done in that book is I'm nearly 63, I've taken decades of experience and multiple times in senior leadership at the head of a particular company or organisation, and starting over again at the bottom. And I've done that 3 times of significance. And many times along the way, I've had my peers in other senior leadership roles say, my God, you're decades ahead of your time. And perhaps that's what does happen for some people. They can be given a position of power and they do their very best. And then when the obstacles are put in the way, they start over at the bottom. And I often hear people say, oh, I cannot possibly go back to doing mundane work. But I can tell you that aside from the fact that you can't have an ego to do that, you cannot have an ego. You've got to have an enormous amount of strength, an enormous amount of tact and diplomacy. But you cannot have an ego to start over brand new at the bottom in a new profession, because you have to then rebuild your credibility. You bring all of those, skills and wisdom and knowledge and shortcuts and tips in how to manage people. You bring that along with you, but unless you stay focused on being willing to prove that you are capable of the new role, that's when you'll start to see more opportunities opening up. I've been really fortunate. My career has sort of, every time I've started new, my career has taken off. And the only exception was when I'd had many decades of senior leadership experience and I kept it quiet. And I rejoined the public sector in Australia at federal level when I had a sick spouse to care for. And I couldn't give the number of hours and the grind that is needed to have a senior leadership role. And I couldn't afford to sacrifice my obligations in the home environment for my career. So I took a position way down the ladder and stayed very, very quiet about my background, bringing my leadership skills, bringing every ounce of maturity and wisdom to the roles that I held. But it was when people found out and I revealed my background that there was this sudden wave of absolute fear that went through everybody. Oh my God, we've had this person working for us. We can't promote her. She'll take our job. That's really sad. And I think it's something that in the Australian governance system needs to be really carefully looked at, because you've got some very talented people. I've talked to many cleaners who have double PhDs. I've spoken to immigrants who can barely speak a word of English, and they're so talented. Some of them are, award-winning violinists or artists that have come from other countries. And we must harness and really relish the skills that people bring to workplaces, so that when you've got an opportunity as a leader to bring somebody up through the levels or the ranks, that you do that without fear, you do that without compromise, and you make sure that that person is given the right kind of things to stimulate them. I have a number of little paragraphs that I'm going to read to you from my memoir, but I wanted to leave that with you just as a bit of a thought to go forward with about, if you're contemplating changing a career because you've lost your job as a result of COVID-19, don't be frightened. Change is an opportunity, never a threat. And I say that in no boxing allowed. Don't look for the negative, look for the positive. Find the things that you love to do and reposition yourself and repackage yourself. You will find some interesting information on our website in the downloadable articles section of the media page, so please feel free to go there. And if you want to reach out to me and have some dialogue via email, please feel free to do that through our website. I'm more than happy to mentor people. I've been doing that for all of my career, mentoring people without charge, and it's something that I love to do. And yes, just feel free to reach out. I'm always available. I hope you have a great week. If you're starting afresh with something, go for it. Change is an opportunity, never a threat. Take care. Have a great week. Bye for now.